America, the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. Welcome to our special Politics by Faith, Western Governments Weaponized. Start off here, the story I shared the other day on my podcast. I have a podcast called Politics by Faith, and we take the stories of the day, the news stories of the day, and we run it through the Bible, run it through a biblical filter, biblical lens, look at biblical stories. What did the Bible say about this? There's nothing new under the sun. It's amazing, all the news stories that happen every single day. You just open up the Bible and there it is right there. It's wild. So that's my podcast. We do it every single day. Do you remember the name Oliver Anthony? Remember that guy? High school dropout, broke, living in a log cabin in the woods, alcoholic. And he wrote this song called Rich Men North of Richmond. And he recorded it in the woods. It was in 2023 and it just broke through everything and spoke to a lot of people. Well, Oliver Anthony, his real name's Chris Lunsford. Oliver Anthony is his grandpa's name. He gave a speech at this conference in London with all these bigwig conservatives. And it was a wonderful message. I've never heard him speak at a venue like this. And I was like, oh, I can't wait to hear what he says. And he started off with a scripture, and I loved it because he didn't say, well, the Bible says. He just started quoting it. And I was like, that sounds like the Bible. It's Ecclesiastes 10. Here's the opening of his speech.
There is an evil I have seen under the sun, the sort of error that arises from a ruler. Fools are put in many high positions, while the rich occupy low ones. I have seen slaves on horseback, while princes go on foot like slaves.
Guys, if we could put the text up on the screen and we can do a quick little breakdown of it. We did a longer version of this on the podcast. At the end there, with the princes on horses or princes walking and the servants on the horses, he's talking about a role reversal. That's what's happening there. We got a role reversal. But in the beginning, the great evil and error from the ruler. You see the colon there at the end of ruler? So he's like, all right, so I've seen evil. I've seen a great error from a ruler. Here's what it is. Colon. Here is what the error and evil is. It's putting people of folly in places of great dignity and putting the rich, which you can read here as someone who's accomplished or capable, or a man who's rich in wisdom, putting that person in a lowly place. Just like you would take a prince and put him on the ground and a servant up on the horse. It's a role reversal. It's not the way it's supposed to be. Now, the word folly here is really important. The word folly, it's in the Bible a lot. I think in our modern context and how I think of it, like first thought of it, is someone who's a fool or commits a folly. It's like an aloofness, like I just made a mistake, right? I made a dumb mistake. What a fool. No. In the Bible, it means a wicked person. So what we have here are rulers and a system that's become so corrupted, because people are corrupt, where wicked people and wickedness has been put on a pedestal as something to desire. Right? It's like folliness and wickedness is of great dignity and put in positions of honor. Right? And righteousness is something that we are now told to look down on. I love that Oliver Anthony, high school dropout. You just read that Bible, you can be wiser than a room full of experts. Romans 1:22 says, claiming to be wise, they become fools. Just read the Bible, you'll be way ahead of the game. But if that's true, Ecclesiastes 10, that wicked men and wickedness take these positions of dignity and rule over us, if that's true, and I believe it is, what does it look like? Well, it looks like, if you're a politician, forgetting your job. And the biblical mandate of your job is to punish evil and reward good. Right? Well, in America, for a long time now, we've been doing the exact opposite of that. We've been rewarding evil and punishing good. It looks like forgetting the people who hired you, forgetting the American people. It looks like intimidating people if you're a ruler, like moms at a school board meeting for caring about how their child is educated in school. This role reversal, this corruption, this wickedness at the top, it looks like arresting pro-life people when local authorities didn't do anything because it's nothing to arrest anyone about. But you arrest them on federal charges to do the bidding of pro-abortion people who want to kill babies, right? To bring in another biblical reference, the king of Judah, Manasseh, he sacrificed his own son in a fire to worship Baal. His own son. That's how committed he was to the cause. So what else does this role reversal look like? This role reversal looks like the FBI busting down the doors of a former president, thinking they could take out that former president from ever running again. Now, it only emboldened him and his supporters because people saw right through it. But they didn't stop. And they kept with the lawfare. That's what the lawfare is, over and over and over. They couldn't help themselves. And then it ends with that man getting shot in the head. The wickedness that Ecclesiastes 10 speaks of can look like a president being the victim of endless lawfare all the way up until he gets shot in the head. That picture was this far away from being something very, very different. This lawfare, this going after the people, a weaponized government, can look like what happened after January 6th, right? Going so hard on the people involved with January 6th that over time, more and more people are like, hold on, Democrats are taking this way too far. But democracy was almost torn asunder by the American terrorists. Like, geez, guys. Weaponization of government can look like social media platforms shutting down speech online. It can look like the Department of Homeland Security creating a disinformation governance board. What is that Orwellian thing? A disinformation governance board. It can look like what the government's done to Elon. I mean, now we have people, setting his cars on fire and drawing swastikas on them. Like, if you were drawing swastikas onto something, I think that means you're the Nazi, or like closer than what you're drawing the thing on. But Elon has been the victim of a weaponized government as well. The California Coastal Commission, this was right before the election. The California Coastal Commission refused to increase the number of SpaceX launches. So SpaceX wanted to increase the number of launches off of an Air Force base in California, and for some reason that had to go in front of the California Coastal Commission. And they rejected it. The chair of the California Coastal Commission said, we're dealing with a company, the head of which has aggressively injected himself into the presidential race. Okay, we're here about SpaceX launches to protect national security. Like, what do you care about whether or not he's injected himself into the president? Another commissioner, Gretchen Newsom, Elon Musk is hopping about the country, spewing and tweeting political falsehoods and attacking FEMA while claiming his desire to help cure hurricane victims with free Starlink access to the internet. Oh no, he helped people. Another California coastal commissioner, Mike Wilson, he said this company is owned by the richest person in the world with direct control of what could be the most expansive communication system in the planet. Just last week, that person was talking about political retribution. They hated him. They hated they hate Trump, but they hate Elon now. And they use their power to reject SpaceX and harm our national security. That's an example of a weaponized federal government. Personally, I'll never forget COVID. I was in California during it. Of course, shutting down churches. We'll talk to someone a pastor who was a victim of that. But also shutting down doctors. During COVID, there was a bill, it was AB 2098, and it penalized any medical professional who disseminates misinformation or disinformation related to COVID-19. Are you kidding me? Doctors were told that if you give out a mask exemption to a child, we will revoke your medical license in the state of California. That is a weaponized government. And it's not just here in America. We can look over in Europe, what they're doing in France with the opposition populist leader there, Le Pen, throwing her in jail. We're going to talk to one of my favorite people across the pond coming up about that in just a couple of minutes there. They've tried it all against Trump. None of it worked yet. Will they stop? Today's special is all about the weaponization of the federal government. And of course it will happen. Our founders knew it. James Madison in Federalist 51, he said, if men were angels, then no government would be necessary. Okay. And if angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls of government would be necessary. Okay, so it goes both ways. So men are not angels. So we need a government and laws to restrain violence and wickedness. Got it. But government is made up of men, many of whom are violent and wicked themselves. So we need to restrain them too. And this is why saving our country means not only not putting wicked people in power, but also all of us, the people, becoming more virtuous ourselves and demanding virtue out of our elected leaders as well. That's the only way that our country will survive. Let's make sure we can identify the threat that has been against us and the threat that is currently existing and will in the future. That's the point of our special today. Politics by Faith, the weaponization of all, not just American, but Western governments. Mike Slater, The First TV. Spread the word. Welcome back to our special Western Governments Weaponized. We're going to go across the pond in the next segment and talk about Europe, but right now let's keep it stateside. Will Chamberlain is here. He's senior counsel at the Article 3 Project. Good to talk to you, Will.
Good to be with you.
Let's be in here. So I want to spend some more time on what's happening now and what you see happening in the future, but let's look back for a minute. What is the most egregious example of government weaponization that you've seen in recent memory?
I mean, honestly, I think it has to be the coordinated persecution of President Trump. You had 4 prosecutions in 4 different jurisdictions in a little over 4 months. They were completely frivolous for the most part. And it was obviously an attempt by law enforcement officials, both state and federal, to keep President Trump out of the White House. I can't think of a more dramatic weaponization of government than that. I can't think of more dramatic lawfare than that. So, I mean, there are a lot of other problems that we've had. I think you can go all the way back to 2020 and the way that the FBI behaved with the Hunter Biden laptop, all Crossfire Hurricane. There were a lot of problems with that, but I think nothing beats attempting to jail the most prominent and likely political opponent of the current administration.
It's pretty wild that not only did it not work in the sense that he's the president today, so it didn't work in that regard, but nothing stuck. And no one's talking about any of it now. That's pretty wild. Why did none of it work in even that sense, even in the legal sense?
I mean, it didn't work in a legal sense because it was all extremely fragile. They failed to take into account the kind of logic of things like presidential immunity. And they were extremely aggressive in going forward with some cases that were obviously frivolous. I think the New York case, the only one where they actually extracted a felony conviction, was a frivolous case, genuinely frivolous, one that shouldn't even gotten past a motion to dismiss. And I think a big part of the problem for the Democrats was whatever victories they won via lawfare, if they didn't actually jail the guy, because those victories were seen as frivolous in the eyes of the public, if anything, they drove more and more people towards Trump.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. That's in the past. What about now? What's the play that these same people, I mean, have they given up? What's their current strategy, you think?
Well, I mean, they're trying, and it looks like they're failing to use temporary restraining orders and injunctions to thwart the operation of the Trump administration, but it's not working. And we've just seen a couple of new Supreme Court rulings coming out that have said pretty clearly demonstrated that this stuff isn't going to work. I expect the Trump administration to be victorious in most of, if not all, of these challenges against their presidential actions. The most obvious one is this Trent-Aragua case where you had a judge in D.C. trying to, certify a class action and issue an injunction preventing the deportation of anybody under the Aliens Enemies Act. And the Supreme Court just told me he didn't have jurisdiction, that all these cases were habeas corpus cases, that they needed to be brought where the individuals were detained. And it's very unlikely they'll be able to get a class action. And that means that, while individual people will be able to bring challenges to their specific detention, saying, I'm not a member of Trent-Aragua or something like that, there won't be any halt to mass deportation.
So again, their legal lawfare through the courts will not be successful. I'm trying to steel man the other side here. So we can do a special here and be like, oh, we've been, the government weaponized against us for all the time since, progressives and communists have been in power. But are the people on the left now saying, oh, the government's now weaponized against me, and the government's weaponized against us now because Elon's firing people? And I don't know, what other examples would they give? And do they have a point, or is it totally different than what we've experienced all these last few decades?
They're trying to use the examples of anti-Semitic and pro-Palestinian non-citizens being deported as an example of lawfare and the weaponization of government. They're saying that the First Amendment rights of these non-citizens are being violated. They're wrong. This is longstanding Supreme Court precedent that when it comes to immigration, you don't have a right to be in the country, and you don't, there aren't First Amendment defenses to deportation and removal. So they're wrong about that, but that's the kind of thing they're looking at. And, I think most Americans will see it as extremely unpersuasive. The idea that non-citizens should be able to behave however they want in the country and can keep their visas, even if, they've managed to antagonize and annoy the president and the secretary of state. Like there's, query whether if you're a non-citizen and the secretary of state looks at you as like, you're disruptive, we don't want you here. Why should you be able to say you are a guest?
Yeah, that's wild though that the left's causes are Tren de Aragua gang members and pro-Hamas rioters. Like that just speaks to how the Trump administration is going about this wisely. Low-hanging fruit, 90-10 issues, and this is what the left is left to defend, at least for now. Last question for you, Will. What is the deep state? What's the deep state up to right now? I remember this is one of the Trump administration's top priority, and understanding that they got to go in and weed it out and take their power away from them. But I don't know how successful they've been. What's the play next? What's the plan? Have they given up?
They're just trying not to get fired, honestly. This is where the Trump administration has done a really good job of very quickly identifying rebellious civil servants and removing them from their posts. And that has done a good enough job that I think the rest of the deep state is running scared. All you need to do is remember the portrait that President Trump is putting out there now. In 2016, it was smiling, sunny optimism. And in 2025, his presidential portrait is, you do not want to mess with me because I will ruin your life. And that's the portrait that is hanging in the offices of every federal building. So I think the deep state's running scared.
Yeah, that's all on behalf of the American people. Will Chamberlain, Senior Counsel at the Article 3 Project. Will, thanks for all your good work. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Talk to one of my friends, Oliver Lane, coming up next over in Europe, as we've outsourced this lawfare now here over to Europe, and they've done the same thing to their populist leader that was attempted here against Donald Trump. We'll get the details on that next right here on the First TV.
"2:30 in the morning. Can I ask why for a second time tonight you are disturbing me and my son in my home?"
Yeah, because there's I've been made aware there's videos that have been posted onto social media, including those that were made this morning.
This morning? What made this morning?
And of my officers that have been round this evening.
Right, and?
So I'm here to kindly ask that you remove said videos from social media. If you do
No, I don't think I've broke the law, so I don't think I will.
And also, I want to advise you that you might well be committing offences under the Malicious Communications Act, okay?
I've never seen that video before. I've seen so many videos like that though, and they're all so surreal. It's like, what is happening? My friend Oliver Lane is here. He's the Breitbart News London editor. Oliver, I want to get to Le Pen and that whole situation, but let's start here with the regular old person. What is that video? What are those? What's the law? What's happening here?
Well, what you had just said is exactly what I was going to say, what I was thinking I was going to open with as you were playing that clip, which is, I have seen so many clips like this recently. They no longer almost surprise or shock, which is citizens taking the opportunity to record themselves being doorstepped by the police for saying naughty, hurtful words online, because, of course, we have a new and developing legal system in the UK where speech online is very heavily policed, very heavily regulated. And this extends out of the internet sphere, in fact, and this is something I'm sure we'll have time to talk about, which is the way the UK is also cracking down on freedom of conscience as well, particularly through prayer, people being literally arrested for that as well. It's a very concerning development.
Yeah. What's the justification for it? What's the philosophy behind it? And then if I can also ask you for what spirit is inside the people of London, like that woman right there who's like, no, I'm not going to take it down. How prevalent is that?
I've got to say I'm very impressed. Probably takes quite a lot of self-confidence to talk to a police officer that way, who's come to your doorstep at 2 a.m. to tell you maybe breaking these exciting and nebulous new laws. What's the justification for it? I don't think there really is a justification, but the philosophy behind it, the ideas, is subsuming individualism into a more socialized society where we give up our freedoms in return for the all-encompassing and cosseting embrace of the state. And of course, to make that system work, if people are stepping out of line, if they're not talking very nicely, well, then you have to haul them off to prison.
Is this a British idea? Is this an old British idea that's coming back, or are you stepping away from the norm?
Very much stepping away from the norm. You've hit the nail on the head. It's disgracefully un-British, and it's one of the key reasons I think that there's such an affinity, I hope still, between the American and the British people, is that we are ground zero for these very old-fashioned and twee ideas these days about liberty, personal liberty and freedom under the law. And this sort of papers, please state, if I can use such a phrase, it's very European. It's post-French Revolution. It is the militarized police of the German pre-unification states. These are things that are alien to our countries, but which are now creeping in through essentially internationalized politics, because that's, of course, a very leftist conceit, globalism. And it makes us all the same, and that's not such a good thing.
I was in my nation's capital not long ago, and in the archives building is the Magna Carta. It's right there. You can look at it, right next to our Declaration of Independence. And it's a beautiful thing and a beautiful connection between our countries.
It's held in more reverence in your country than it is in mine, which is a terrible indictment to the state of modern Britain.
What's the difference between the British idea and the European ideal? If you could speak more to that.
Are we talking about the ideal of freedom, what that means?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the best sort of example is to compare the United Kingdom and Germany, for instance, because Germany, probably out of necessity, let's be honest, after what happened in the early 20th century, has very strict laws on thought and expression and act, because it seems that we need to control the Germans. We've been through that game a few times already, haven't we? Fighting the Germans. But they have a system where, for very simple things, actually, insulting politicians, that's illegal in Germany. Spreading memes is illegal in Germany. We have a story up on Breitbart London just this morning about the editor of a German news website, I think, who's just been sentenced to 7 months in prison and an enormous fine. I don't know exactly how much it is. The way they calculate fines in Germany is it's a percentage of your annual income. And I think they've asked him to surrender 60% of 1 year's income for him, because he posted a meme of Germany's interior minister holding a sign, obviously photoshopped, reading in German, "I hate freedom of speech." And just to prove the point categorically, she then sent the police to come and get this guy and to drag him through the courts. So the system they have in Germany is one that ensures social harmony by legislating it into existence. And it does this through these restrictive laws where if you step out of the bounds of what the government considers to be decent, you'll be hauled through the courts. And it was never like that in the United Kingdom because essentially as a nation, we could trust each other to be civil enough to have discourse, to disagree without feeling the need to report each other to the police. And like I say, that's changing. And there are some very dangerous, I think, outcomes from this. So obviously, in the case of this individual news editor, which is obviously something of interest to me because I'm a news editor and I don't want to go to prison, that's a terrible outcome for him. But for wider German society, you have, for instance, the emergence now of the Alternative für Deutschland, Alternative for Germany, this new right-wing populist, if you like, sovereigntist political party. They've been going for about 15 years now, and they are now practically, fact, actually, the official opposition in Germany. Just today or yesterday, they are the biggest party in a German poll for the first time. They are the largest opposition party in the German parliament. And there are moves afoot, and have been for about 2 years now, to ban this party. They're already being spied on by what they call the Office for the Protection of the Constitution, which is Germany's political police. Again, a very alien concept to you and I, having something that is actually officially the political police. But that's how it's done in Europe. So they're being surveyed by the political police, the Office of the Protection of the Constitution, have been for several years. And all of this just seems so strange to us, doesn't it? This isn't the world we feel like we live in. Is this the Western world? But yeah, Germany's part of it. So that's the difference. Some of the key differences, I think, between where we are and where we want to be as English-speaking Westerners, and where the dark places the Europeans can lead us to.
Yes. I want to pivot, although not that much of a pivot. We got about 4 minutes, to Le Pen. What are the accusations against Le Pen in France?
So this is, and in 4 minutes, a very concerning but not entirely surprising development. She is being potentially sent to prison. This is Marine Le Pen, who is the front runner to be the next president of France. This is like top flight lawfare. You'll never find lawfare like this anywhere else in the Western world. And what she has done is she has committed the crime of existing as a MEP in the European Parliament. One of the objections that us Britons had to the European Union when we were in it is that it was what we called the gravy train. There's so much money sloshing around inside the European Union, inside the European Parliament, and there's almost like a miasma there. You can't be there and not be corrupted. So they have a system where there's a huge amount of money to fund political parties. If you don't take that cash, you're at a competitive disadvantage compared to the parties, all of the other parties that do, because they all do. And sometimes it seems through accounting errors, which are so easy to make, or you think you're going to get away with because everybody else gets away with it, the money ends up in the wrong place. Now, the European Union never passes audits. This stuff is never checked. The only time the figures are run, it seems to me, is when it's a right-wing populist who has taken that cash. So the point made, and I have to emphasize this is something that's even admitted to by, say, left-wing and centrist commentators in Europe when they're looking at what's happened to Marine Le Pen in the past 2 weeks. They say, well, hang on, everybody does this. Why is it that just she is being picked up on this particular law and where this money goes? And because of it, because of this selective interpretation of justice, she may be banned altogether from political participation in France. As I say, lawfare at its worst.
One more specific question, then we'll go broader. How much of this do you put towards like accounting errors or mistakes or whatever versus like a malicious embezzlement of money that sure everyone else is doing, but I did a bad thing too, right? Where do you put it on that spectrum?
I think it's probably halfway between the two. I wouldn't say it's malicious, because when you're inside the European Union, the money's there for the taking, and I think there was probably, say, 10, 15 years ago, a certain cynical feeling among a lot of people that, well, we're going to miss out if we don't do it. I'm not excusing it personally. I like to think that in an alternate universe where I was an MEP, I would resist that temptation. But the fact is, Everyone does it. There was some research we cited last week, which I think said that like a fifth of all members of the European Parliament are thought to possibly be guilty of this. But none of them are ever convicted, because it's like what's it called? A Mexican execution squad. Please excuse me if I've got that metaphor wrong. If one person blows the whistle, everybody gets their heads blown off, except when it's on the right, because you can pick them off.
Yep. Okay. What will be the political result of this in France and Europe? Will it be like Trump with the lawfare attempts here, where it just gained him in power and he got more support? Will it backfire?
Okay, so my money's for the former. Whether Le Pen is actually able to contest this election or not, at this point almost doesn't matter, because she's done something that I think very few charismatic political leaders actually achieve, because they're so invested in themselves, it's relatively rare. She has managed to groom a successor, Jordan Bardella, who's the head, I think, of the Le Pen's faction in the French Parliament. If she is, through this lawfare, prevented from standing whatsoever, He's a well-known character in France now. He's look. We're going to be frank. He's a young guy. He's handsome. He's charismatic. He will take on the baton. He will run, and they'll have this. And I hate to use this phrase because it's essentially left-wing language, but they'll have this fantastic grievance narrative, which is we have one election left to save France. If they could put Marine Le Pen in prison, they'll put you in prison too. So vote for us to save the country, and that's a very powerful thing to take to the ballot box, as you know very well in America with Trump.
Okay, last question overall. Do you see the weaponization of Western governments increasing against the people, or do you see the people rising up and ultimately winning?
But the only answer I can give to that is yes, we see both simultaneously. People are rising up precisely because the weaponization of governments against the people is increasing. And that's a great way of putting it. And it manifests itself in so many ways. But the key one, and this is the big base layer upon which everything else is built, is that if a democracy means anything, it is the sovereignty of the people. Because if your vote doesn't count for anything, because there's a deep state, and whatever politicians you put in place are undermined by the permanent government, say, in that sort of instance, your sovereignty, your personal sovereignty as a voter is being undermined. And if you have that, you have nothing.
Oliver, what do you have in that cup of yours?
Why, it's fine English tea, of course, and it's the only thing keeping my voice going.
Next time we chat on the TV, I'll join you. We'll both be drinking English tea.
We'll
I'll
arrange
have America's finest, whatever version of that filth we might I can find at the grocery store. Oliver Lane, Breitbart News London editor, Breitbart.com for all of Oliver's latest. Good to talk to you, brother.
Thanks for having me on again.
Cheers. We'll talk to a pastor up in Canada coming up next. Who the government has attacked him. That next right here on the First TV. Spread the word.
Of this property, you Nazis! Out! Out! Gestapo is not allowed here. Immediately, Gestapo is not allowed. Out! You're not welcome here. Nazis are not welcome here. Gestapo is not welcome here. Do not come back, you Nazi psychopaths. Unbelievable, sick, evil people. Intimidating people in a church during the Passover. You Gestapo, Nazi, communists, fascists. Don't you dare coming back here.
Welcome back to our special Western Governments Weaponized. That was the voice of Pastor Artur Pawlowski, founder of Street Church Ministries. As you can see, the Canadian government came after him during COVID to shut down his church. Artur did not stand for it. Pastor, hello, sir. When you hear that video again, what are we, a couple years later, 5 years later or so, do you wish you maybe handled it differently? Do you wish you handled it a little more whimsical, a little more measured in your response to the government?
Civilized. I think that's what you were looking for.
Yes.
Well, we were not called to be, in quote, civilized. We were called to be truthful, accurate to the biblical standards. Good people do not bow before evil people. They do not bow before wickedness. I did what I believe everyone in Christianity was supposed to do. Every pastor, every clergy, every priest was supposed to be the light in the darkness. Light does not bow before darkness. Light shows up and darkness has to go. Those people who are breaking the law, they are still breaking the law. And I believe that it's our job as Christians to put an end to it, to stop evil from spreading. We are witnessing a constant repetition of history throughout the generations. When good people will not do what is required of them, well, then you have what we witnessed in the past few years. And this is just the beginning, my friends.
I want to get to what you think is next, but Pastor, those people were just doing their job. You call them Nazi psychopaths. They're just good. They are good people just doing their job, doing what their government, their bosses told them to do. What's wrong with that?
Well, of course, you have to understand I am a Polish immigrant. I grew up in hell under the boots of the Soviets behind the Iron Curtain. But I also grew up in Poland when I've heard the stories of the same people few years before that called the Nazis. You have to understand that the Nazi Party from 1933 to 1939 enacted over 2,000 laws against the Jewish people. And they also claimed that we are just doing our job. I remember the documentaries. I remember the stories from my grandparents telling me that those officers were just doing their job, shooting women and children, building Auschwitz-Birkenau and other concentration camps. They were just doing their job. So in a way, my answer to those people would be, were you okay with those people doing their job? Would you sign up for their salaries? Would you support the Nazi Party or Communist Party or Socialist Party? Well, why you're supporting this unbelievable attack on our liberties and our lives in the 21st century? I think this is just a clear repetition of history. And again, we must oppose it.
Your dog just as fired up as you are, Pastor. I appreciate that. I think that's great. Everyone in the house is excited and passionate about this topic. What do you think's next? You said this is just the beginning. I think in America, we're happy here because Trump's now in power and we're trying to root out the deep state, and our side is doing we got some wins now. So I think a lot of people are still on their victory lap thinking that it's won, the battle's won. What do you see?
No, the battle is not won. This is just the beginning. And this is my message to the American people. Instead of just having kumbaya, riding the fence and enjoying your cruise, this is not the time to go back to sleep. This is the time to finish the job, finish the enemies, because you have to understand one man cannot do it. One administration cannot do it. One church cannot do it. We must do it together, because if you don't, those wicked, evil, corrupted, rotten to the core individuals will come and finish you off. So America is going, in my opinion, into the right direction. Canada is going opposite. We have a full-blown soft totalitarian regime, police state. Our judges are corrupt as corrupt you can be. Our politicians, if I was their king, those people would be charged with treason. And the saddest part of the story is they're not stopping. That's the problem. They're not stopping. We're being taxed to death. Canadians are paying 50% in taxes, and they're not stopping. Tax upon tax upon tax. So I guess I'm waiting for the people to be awakened. And you are mentioning my dog. In the Bible, it says that my leaders are dumb dogs. They don't even know how to bark. Well, my dog is a dog of Artur Pawlowski. We know how to bark, and that's what I was doing, barking.
That's right. Tell us what you did when you were ultimately arrested by your government and how you stood in your faith throughout that. Or how did the Bible, how did Christianity help you through that period that you're still going through now?
Well, I would tell you that without Jesus, I would not be able to survive this. I mean, solitary confinement, metal cages, psych ward, over 360 citations, over 120 court cases, courts of appeal, arrests so many times that we don't even remember. My family was targeted, is still being targeted. My son, every time he crosses the border, is detained by Canadian authorities for testifying before the European Parliament about treatment of pastors in Canada under this regime. And of course, my brother David was arrested with me for keeping the church's doors open 12 times. Actually, I wrote a book about the whole thing called Lions Do Not Bow. And I included everything in the book. And believe it or not, this book has been already confiscated by the Canadian government 3 times. And this book was stopped at the border when we wanted to have it shipped. In Canada, we had to go directly through the publisher and through the printer. So that tells you everything, how terrified those people are of someone that simply preaches the truth. So for me, the ordeal is not over. I'm still in court. We're still fighting. But we know how the story ends. We win in the end. And without Jesus, without God, I'm telling you, I would never, first of all, signed up for this, and I would never survive this. What kept me and it keeps me going is an understanding that we are lions, following the lion from the tribe of Judah, and we know how the story ends. We win in the end. And in a way, my question to those people would be, who do you think you are, you uncircumcised Philistines, that you should defy the armies of the living God? In the end, we win. That's the message. That's the story. If Artur Pawlowski can do it, that means anyone can.
What's the story in the Bible that you look to as an example of tyranny? We started off with Ecclesiastes 10, and we talked about some truth there. But what do you look to in the Bible for, like, oh yeah, there's nothing new under the sun. It's just the same stuff again.
Yeah, I love the story of Esther and Mordecai. Mordecai was told by the government, by the king, to bow before the wicked Haman. But good people do not bow before wicked, evil Hamans of today. And of course, the story should be called the story of Mordecai. And what a magnificent, amazing victory in the end. The very devices the enemy built against Mordecai were used against Haman's own family and his own head. Of course, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they received option to do the right thing, just bow before the authorities, bow before the government. Well, you should obey the king. Well, they chose not to, and off they went to the fire. But it was in the fire that God dealt with their enemies. It was in the fire that they had an encounter with the living God. It was in the fire that they were set free. In the fire, they had this unbelievable testimony that we read to this day. And in the fire was their promotion. So in the end, I would say to the Christians, instead of running away from difficulties, running away from the fire, we should go and run towards the fire, because that's where our answer is. God purifies us through the fire. And when we go out through that testing, we shine even more.
Artur Pawlowski, where can people follow you, learn more, support you?
Streetchurch.ca, streetchurch.ca, because we feed thousands of people on the streets of Calgary. We have never stopped. We meet in the building, outside the building, and we have no intention of stopping. We know, again, how the story ends. So if you want to come and support us, streetchurch.ca. God bless you.
Wonderful. Pastor, thank you. You as well.
Thank you.
Tremendous. Let me wrap up. Some final thoughts here. Our guests were so wonderful. I don't have a lot of time. We're going to do more of this on my podcast, Politics by Faith. We'll go into more detail. That last question I asked the pastor, give me some biblical examples of corrupt rulers. It's like, there's a ton. I don't even know where to. It's like the easiest question ever if you know your Bible. Let me wrap up with this, though. 2 Timothy 3. 2 Timothy 3. Paul says, but know this, that in the last days, perilous times will come. And he lists not of dangerous times, but of wicked people. Right? This is interesting. He didn't write about famine or disease or the terrible things that will happen. He then wrote of wicked and depraved men that you see there. Now listen, see if you think there's any of this today. For men will be lovers of themselves. That's the key we'll get to. Lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers. Any of this sound familiar? Disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its powers. And from such people, turn away. My podcast, Politics by Faith, is my podcast. We take the story of the day, the news of the day. Listen, if the news drives you crazy and you can't take it anymore, but you still want to be involved, right? You want to get out, but you still need to know a little bit, this is the podcast for you. We give you just enough of the news to know what's going on, and then we bring it to a biblical lens and end with truth and peace, and it's a good ending. As the pastor was talking about, right? The good guys win. We win. God wins. But let's just focus on lovers of themselves, which is so amazing because all the self-help books of today are all about how amazing you are and love yourself more. And here's the Bible being like, that's the beginning of the end. Once you become the center of the universe, nothing else matters. Certainly not obedience to God and striving to help others. No, you can't do that if it's all about you. Think about that list we just read. Like, how many of those do we check off today? But I love the end of Paul's message. He says, but you must continue in the things which you have learned and been assured of, knowing from whom you have learned them, and that from childhood you have known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith which is in Jesus Christ. All Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, thoroughly equipped for every good work. Paul's telling Timothy of the dangerous times that are to come. In dangerous times, uncertain times, chaotic times, some people are swept away by them. Some people go into hiding. But none of those are the right thing. The right posture is to stand strong, knowing that you're standing in the Word of God and He will protect you. It's a promise. And then you'll have everlasting life. There's so many injustices in our country. Let's do the best we can to make sure that we don't have as many self-inflicted wounds. And then also, if you're the victim of an injustice, just know that God is at work. Our job is to stand strong in the Word. More on my podcast, Politics by Faith, every day. Take the news of the day, run it through the Bible, find peace and joy no matter what's going on. Politics by Faith, wherever you listen to podcasts. Mike Slater, The First TV. Spread the word.